Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts about the 40K universe. I am your host Gershwin and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue our talk about Captain Lysander. This is part 3. If you have not checked out part 1 or 2, please jump on over to our channel and look for the playlist of Captain Lysander. So let's get into 40 facts about the Iron Fist Captain Lysander. Captain Vogan's third company did not deploy for another quarter of an hour, their launch delayed by a concentrated bombing run on the Storm of Wrath. By the time their drop pod smashed home amongst the dead and dying, the battle had moved on. Comm traffic told Vogan that Lysander had moved on into the fortress command spire, and half of his 5th company had gone with him. The rest, under Hagen's command, had spread out to secure the fortress depths. Bolter fire still ranging in the middle distance, the battle was far from over. The further into the Forge Heart the 3rd Company drove, the more twisted it became. Gone were the stark lines of the Imperial Manufactorum. Instead, mecha roots pulsed and withered around pillars fused from metal and flesh. Not all of Taladorn's inhabitants had survived to reach the mines. Many, infected by some machine contagion, had become the materials from which the Forge Heart had been fashioned. Their contoured faces stared out from the walls, mouth open in silent screams at their horrific fate. Veteran Sergeant Garadon, Vogan's second in command and the company's most decorated warrior, broke his customary silence as he looked upon these tortured dead and swore to avenge them. Under Vogan's command, the newcomers pushed on into the hellish maze of smelting pits and blazing forges. Lysander's trail of destruction was easily found, but following it was another matter. More Iron Warriors were converging onto the battle, drawn to Lysander's presence as moths to a vengeful flame. They found the 3rd Company instead, and a vicious running battle broke out amongst the smelting pits. Some of the gantry lines and scaffolds were unstable, and many combatants' battles ended not in glorious volleys of bolter fire, but in seething pits of molten metal. As the battle raged on, a quadrupedal demon engine charged out of the darkness. It leapt high onto a wall, then pounced down into a tactical squad run-on. 5 battle brothers went down as the Mauler fiend struck, the survivors hurled away by the beast's flailing tentacles. The demon engine was in motion again, even before its victims had hit the ground, pistons driving it onward towards Vogan. The captain had but a moment before the creature was on him, and it was not enough. Even as Vogan's crackling power fist came around, the Mauler fiend slammed into him. The beast's colossal mass bore the captain to the ground, and Vogan's gauntlet slammed into the side of its armored skull. The blow smashed one of the monster's glittering eyes, leaving a vivid scar of ruined metal in its place. The beast barely slowed. With a hiss of pistons, it punched a massive fist down onto the captain's breastplate, shattering his power armor and pulping the Space Marine's chest. Vogan died instantly. Tearing his attention from the traitorous Marines, Sergeant Garadon barked orders into his comlink. Las cannons blazed, boring deep into the beast's warped metal torso. The Mauler fiend roared in pain and gathered itself for another pounce, but the las cannon flared for a second time, their devastating energy striking with precision and shearing off one of the demon engine's 4th legs. With a last terrible roar, the Mauler fiend slumped to its side, oil blood spilled from its wounds. With the demon engine's defeat, the Iron Warrior's determination faded. In 1s and 2s, they broke off into the darkened corridors, detailing the remains of Squad Renan to carry Captain Vogan's remains back to the drop zone. Garadon assumed command and redoubled the company's pace. At last, after what seemed to be an age, the 3rd Company emerged onto the pinnacle of the command spire, or what was left of it. What had once been the planetary governor's palace was now overrun by the coiling corruption of the Iron Warriors. Scattered throughout, windows and gateways were vast, coil-encrusted hexagonal pods. At the apex of each, cables pulsed as they delivered vital fluids to whatever lay within. But it was the battle raging at the chamber's heart that drew Garadon's attention. There amongst the carbon-scored tangled of ruined machinery, some 30 warriors of the 5th Company fought alongside the bulkier Terminator-armored veterans of the 1st. The dead were piled deep around them, but there was golden armor amongst the gray. To Garradon's eyes, too many battle brothers had fallen, and more would perish before this battle was done. The Imperial fists were severely outnumbered, and their air was full of metallic roars of demon engines. In the center of the chamber, Lysander clashed with a heavier, bulkier figure clad in what had once been Terminator armor. Now both flesh and armor were merged, a horrific melding of man and machine. This was the warlord of the Sons of the Forge, come at last to face his domain's invaders. Garradon didn't hesitate. With a single barked word of command, he threw the third company into the fray. Lysander saw none of it, for he was lost to the battle with his hated foe. This was no mere warlord he faced, but Shantu, ruler of vile Maladrax. The fist of Dorn swung about, shattering Shantu's left shoulder guard, but still the warlord came on, a leer upon his face, and a demon sword grasped tight in his left hand. Knocking Lysander's second blow aside, Shantu slammed his unwounded shoulder into Lysander's chest. As the first captain staggered backwards, Shantu pressed the fingers of his free hand tight upon his left gauntlet. Responding to this silent signal, the pods lined about the wall cracked open with a flare of greenish gas, and the feeder cables tore free. Metallic roars echoed across the command spire, their timbre somewhere between rage and agony. The scores of glistening demon engines lurched forward into the battle. As Lysander threw himself at Shantu once again, his command link crackled into life. The blockage fleet had been driven off. The Ultramarines had made orbit, and Captain Sikaris was now offering reinforcement. Lysander was enraged. This was the Imperial Fist's battle. Honor decreed that they would claim victory from their adversaries, as they had many times before. Hagen's forces would soon return from the depths to join the battle, and Perturabo's cursed children would be annihilated. Catching the strike of Shantu's demon sword high upon his shield, the first captain angrily refused the Ultramarines' assistance and fought on. Elsewhere, the newly birthed demon engines had seemed disoriented at first, and this gave Sergeant Garradon some much-needed time to react. The third company were still somewhat distant from the linking up with the beleaguered battle brothers, so Garradon ordered the warriors to form a defensive ring in the heart of the nearest courtyard. From this living fortress, his devastators could track and destroy the onrushing demon engines. At least that was the plan. As his battle brothers took their positions, Garradon saw that these monstrosities were not quite the same as the creature that had slain Vogan. They were incomplete somehow, trailing metal tubings and vicious fluids. Some had stubby, half-formed weaponry. Others had warped and molted armor, the texture akin to molten wax. They were unfinished, Garradon realized. Shantu must have been desperate in need, but half-forged or not, the newly woken demon engines quickly proved themselves fearsome foes. A roar of engines from the skies above at last denoted the arrival of the flight of Imperial Fist Storm Ravens. The heavy rasping of their assault cannons a welcome sound amidst the carnage. The heavy shells tore into the Iron Warriors, driving them back from where the 5th Company, who had accompanied Lysander, stood. They made little impact on the demon engine's armor hides. With a screech, a Helldrake plunged from the bleak skies, its talons tearing down into one of the Storm Ravens. Crippled, the flyer plunged downward, its impact tearing a bloody furrow through the 3rd Company's position. As more Helldrakes arrived from the skies, the surviving Storm Ravens banked away to begin their own fight for survival. Between their intervention and the fortitude of the 1st Company's Terminators, the 5th would endure. The same could not be said for those who had fought to rescue them. Its formation scattered by the Storm Raven's impact, the 3rd Company was being mauled. Fire rained down from all sides, and 24 battle brothers had fallen already. The survivors fought on, teeth gritted against the pain of their wounds, but their foes were too many. A Forge Fiend's autocannon blazed, and 3 battle brothers of Squad Tyon were torn apart. Brother Conrath, the lone dreadnought assigned to the 3rd Company, turned his multi-melta on the monstrosity and reduced it to a steaming slag, but his armor soon buckled as other demon engines returned fire. Rolling gouts of warp energy tore through the 3rd Company's position, the blistering clouds melting armor and incinerating flesh. Sergeant Garadon, his right arm shattered by an autocannon shell, saw his brothers dying about him and roared defiance. Again, Lysander's command link crackled into life, an offer of assistance, but again he refused. Hagen, as yet unaware of the situation atop the spire, made no response, but Garadon looked around at the ruin of his battle brothers and came to the decision. Triggering his own comm, he made formal acceptance of Sikaris' offer. Lysander's bellow of rage flooded the channel and drowned out the Ultramarines' response. Garadon paid no heed and triggered his teleporter Homer. A moment later, there was a flicker of motion as some 30 Ultramarine Terminators materialized in the chamber. Storm bolters and auto-assault cannons already bellowing their anthem of war. This new arrival marked the last turning point in the Battle of Taladorn. Shantu had no surprises left, and following Garadon's request for assistance, the forces marshaled against the Warsmith rose steeply. Next to arrive were the Ultramarine 2nd Company, the Thunderhawks Gladius and Spatha, descending from the skies amidst a whining of turbo laser fire. Hard on their heels, deploying from Storm Raven gunships at breakneck speed, were the vanguard of Captain Tycho's Blood Angels. Where before the Space Marines had been outnumbered, now they had the upper hand. The Ultramarines advanced methodically through the rubble, their line of battle expanding and contracting to match the Iron Warriors' desperate counterattacks. One of Shantu's lieutenants, a giant of a man named Merex, took refuge in the remains of a divinitous shrine. The brute directed his fellows' fire with such ruthless efficiency that an Ultramarine who approached was all but torn apart. This ended when Tycho loosened his death company against the ruins. Seemingly impervious to pain, the black-armored warriors forged on through the storm of fire, hacking at the defenders with chainswords or tearing them apart with bare hands. Overwhelmed by their fury, Merex's makeshift bastion collapsed, the survivors left to the Ultramarines' guns. By the time Captain Hagen's demi-company had reached the command spire, the force upon which Lysander had pinned his hopes of victory, the Iron Warriors were in full retreat. Shantu, seeing his cause lost, fled with his followers and escaped into the tunnels below. It would take many more days to fully drive the Iron Warriors from Taladorn, and to scour their works from the planet's surface, but no effort was spared until the task was complete. Dozens of traitorous and many hundreds of bond slaves were hunted down and slain, but of Shantu no trace could be found. Lysander said little in that time and spoke not at all to Sikaris and Tycho, instead leaving Sergeant Julin to parley with what he still saw as an unwelcomed ally. Once Shantu had fled beyond his reach, Lysander had at last awoken from his vengeful fever and was forced to confront the cost of his obsession, and it was a high cost. Over 90 of his battle brothers had been slain, including Captain Vogan. Had Lysander awaited to make a coordinated assault with the Ultramarines, or Blood Angels, many of those deaths could have been avoided. Worse, had the Ultramarines not intervened, the tally of honored dead would have been much higher. As for Garadon, he and the 3rd Company played little part in the closing phases of Taladorn's campaign. The apothecaries deemed a dozen battle brothers of the Sentinels of Terra fit to fight, and the sergeant was not amongst them. As the 5th Company aided the Ultramarines and Blood Angels in scouring Taladorn, Garadon endured a frustrating period of convalescence. The inactivity gave him much time to think on the 3rd Company's fate, and by the time the Storm of Wrath was en route to Phalanx, Garadon was determined that Lysander's prideful folly would be brought to account. And those were 40 facts about Captain Lysander. Of course, this is not the end. There's a part 4 which is going to close out the series of this Imperial Fist captain. And like I've mentioned before, I'm collecting an Imperial Fist army, and just because I want to put it out there, I don't know how I feel about this special character. At first, I thought, oh, this guy's a badass. He was trapped, or he was lost in the warp, came back. But after learning of his just blatant destruction of his own company's I don't know how I feel about playing him in the battlefield. Comment down below, let me know what you guys think, and of course subscribe to the channel so you guys can get part 4 and you can finish knowing the tale of Captain Lysander. Thank you guys so much for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.